Last week, President Vladimir Putin warned that he had changed the doctrine governing Moscow's use of nuclear weapons so that other nuclear-armed states could be struck if they allow conventional weapons to be used to attack Russian territory. Ukraine duly responded for the first time, using its new permission granted by the US and UK to launch missiles at military targets in Russia. After informing the US in advance, Putin fired a new medium-range ballistic missile at Dnipro. This was the absolute minimum Putin could do not to lose face, especially given his warning a few weeks ago that if the West started attacking Russian territory, he would respond with nuclear firepower, notes Dominic Lawson, a columnist for The Times. The columnist reports that since Western countries began supplying Ukraine with weapons for its defense, the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates that Russian officials have made reference to the use of nuclear weapons more than 200 times. There was a moment when Washington actually believed the Kremlin was seriously considering deploying tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. That was 2 years ago, when Russian forces were pushed back in a miserable retreat. The reason Putin may have been seriously considering the use of tactical nuclear weapons at that time was that it seemed that Russia might lose. But now the Kremlin will be far less worried about the state of the war, the columnist believes. Regarding the threat of attacking NATO countries with nuclear weapons, the author doubts that Putin would go for it, believing that despite his brutality, he is really trying to stay alive. Earlier, President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed skepticism over Russian President Vladimir Putin's continued nuclear threats since the full-scale war, saying that Putin loves his life and is therefore likely afraid to use nuclear weapons. Nobody knows what's in his head, Zelensky said. He could use nuclear weapons on any country at any time, or not, but I don't think that he will. Since the launch of the full-scale invasion, Russia has repeatedly invoked the threat of its nuclear arsenal to deter Western military support for Ukraine. The question, what will Putin do next, is usually followed by, would Putin use a nuclear weapon in the Ukraine war? The Russian president has dropped some unsubtle hints. On announcing the start of his special military operation, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, he had issued a warning to those who may be tempted to interfere from the outside. No matter who tries to stand in our way or create threats for our country and our people, the Kremlin leader declared they must know that Russia will respond immediately, and the consequences will be such as you have never seen in your entire history. The Kremlin is stepping up its blackmail of the West with its new Wunderwaffe, the Oreshnik missile. Deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council and the second person in the state, Dmitry Medvedev, has issued another round of threats against Europe and other allies of Kyiv. The text was published on his official Telegram channel. The Kremlin, through Medvedev, has issued an ultimatum to the West. He threatens to inflict unacceptable damage on Western countries with his Oreshnik if they do not refuse military aid to Kyiv. The damage to European capitals is unacceptable. It is impossible to shoot down with modern means, and we are talking about minutes. Bomb shelters will not help. So the only hope is that kind Russia will warn about launches in advance. Therefore, it is better to stop supporting the war, Medvedev wrote. He also responded to rumors that the West is considering returning Ukraine to nuclear status as a guarantee of non-aggression by Russia in the future. Medvedev threatens to hand over its nuclear weapons to enemies of the United States in such a case. As has become traditional, Medvedev's post contained, in addition to threats, a huge number of insults addressed to the leaders of Ukraine, the USA, and Europe. Recall, on November the 21st, Russia attacked the Ukrainian city of Dnipro with a ballistic missile, presumably with a multiple warhead. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin claims that it was a test launch of Russia's newest medium-range missile, the Oreshnik, which allegedly has no analogues. The Russians are carefully hiding its technical characteristics. Experts doubt that Oreshnik really exists. According to the Ukrainian side, the Russians used a classic intercontinental missile on the Dnieper, having removed the nuclear filling from it beforehand. The Ukrainian GUR claims that the launch was carried out by the Kedra system. There is also a version that the attack was carried out by a Rubez missile, the development of which the Russians never completed. On August the 6th, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to invade Kherson region, taking control of a large territory and many prisoners of war. On November the 7th, Putin's army launched a counterattack with the goal of driving the Ukrainian armed forces out of Russian territory. The enemy army is trying to break through to Sudza through the territory of Zeleny. In 2 weeks of fighting, Putin's army has not yet made significant progress, Forbes reports, and the Zeleny-Sudza highway is littered with destroyed or abandoned armored vehicles of the Russian armed forces. At the same time, the Kremlin is not going to give in and has increased its presence in the Kherson region to 50,000 servicemen. We are talking about units of the 155th Marine Brigade, the 76th, 83rd and 106th Airborne Brigades, which are fighting northwest of Zeleny. We expect a major Russian offensive on my flank in the Kherson region in the near future, wrote Kriegsforscher, a drone operator for the Ukrainian Marine Corps who supported the Ukrainian Corps in Kherson. Initially, Putin's plan were to knock out the Ukrainian armed forces by the end of February 2025, but the plans changed after Donald Trump was elected to the post of head of the White House. On the one hand, Putin already controls 11% of Ukrainian territory after the events of 2022, but at the same time, he does not want to give up even a small part of the Kherson region. 2 Russian airborne divisions, 1 airborne brigade and 1 marine brigade will launch an offensive with a lot of maneuvering. The Kriegsforscher warned the occupiers will be confronted by the Ukrainian armed forces consisting of the 17th, 41st, 47th, 82nd and 95th brigades amounting to approximately 20,000 servicemen. The 17th Tank Brigade had recently been fighting defensive battles in the Sudza area. They had managed to control several of their T-64 tanks into supply vehicles. Footage from November the 16th shows a T-64 delivering ammunition to the Ukrainian armed forces at one of the positions, after which it opened fire on the enemy position with a 125mm gun. During its retreat to the base, the tank was attacked by an enemy drone. The armored vehicle itself was slightly damaged, but the crew survived and completed the combat mission. The Ukrainian forces are more than twice inferior in numbers to the enemy army, but both the artillery of the Ukrainian armed forces and the strikes by Western missiles on military facilities of the Russian armed forces in the Kursk region inspire optimism. Last week, the Ukrainian armed forces carried out a series of strikes on military ammunition depots and a command post of the Russian armed forces.